we'll go ahead and kind of dive in. This is going to be the April Patreon live cast for the Suited Shooter. So for those unfamiliar, just brief background, kind of who you are and how you got into the space and all that jazz.
Yeah. So let's see, 9 years Marine Corps, but I was not infantry. I was avionics. I worked on helicopters. I mean, we still shot rifles. I still shot a bunch of weapons, but I learned about electricity and aircraft and stuff like that. I learned just enough for me to get really good at it and, to see the world. I saw 10 different countries, including Afghanistan. We went down to Louisiana for a little bit to help out with Hurricane Katrina relief. So that was pretty cool. I got out, and of course, my hometown is Memphis, Tennessee. So I came back home, and it was not as safe as it was when I left. So I quickly ended up getting into, training, and I found out quickly that the guys that were doing better in training were the guys that compete. So I got into competition. I started shooting USPSA, IDPA, Steel Challenge, and now I teach.
So we first met at the Rangemaster Tactical Conference last year in 2021. And honestly, what caught my attention was it was the Sunday, and you were rolling around the conference in what looked like your church clothes. Like you were the only other dude in a collared shirt and a vest. And so I was like, all right, well, I want to go at least, shake this dude's hand because he's dressing like a respectable adult, and
kind of go from there. So how many years had you been doing the tactical conference? Like when did you start that?
Last year was my first year.
Oh, no kid, no.
So yeah, I didn't get into the Tom Givens and the Rangemaster family until 2019. It took me 5 years to catch back up with him.
Yeah.
So, and it was weird because I had met the whole rest of the family before I met him.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, being in Memphis, I met all the guys at the mothership, and they were starting up a new range. It's called Top Gun Memphis, and so I got on with those guys. A lot of their classes were a lot of the original folks were getting all their certifications and their original coursework from Akil Kadir and Tiffany Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just meeting up with the whole family, and then it's like, have you guys heard of Tom Givens? And they're like, have we heard of Tom Givens? Tell them when you go down there to visit, tell them we said hey.
The notable experience that I wanted to touch on was this year at the Tactical Conference, you were both one of the top 16 in the shoot-off and a participant in the Experiential Learning Lab that Craig Douglas hosted. And why I think that's relevant is, like you said, if you spend any time kind of in the digital gun space, you see the camps become very clearly defined pretty quickly. And one of the hot topics of the day as of late is the importance of / value of, depending on who you're talking to, the sub-second draw as kind of like the standard. And given the fact that you were in the top 16, at the very least over the weekend, because everybody that I talk to that's a high-performing shooter is always obnoxiously humble about it. Like, oh, I was just having a good day. So I'm taking that out away from you right now. At the very least, in that window of the weekend, you had pretty strong ownership of your mechanical shooting skill, but then you also had the exposure of kind of the real-world situation. And so I just want to hear you talk about those two and how they complemented each other or didn't, and all of that. So have at it.
Let's see. It's easier to talk about the shoot-off first because it's very mechanical and it's very technical, and I'm kind of blessed with the mindset that shooting itself is generally easy. You know what I mean? Like, just I'm going to borrow some words from my friend Akil Kadir. He's my brother. I love him, and he says, hey, shooting is basically like, when it comes down to self-defense, it's pretty simple. You get the gun between you and the bad guy, You put the holes where you need them. You fix the gun if you need to. You reload the gun if you need to, and then you safely put it back in the holster. And 90% of your high speed, like Ricky Bobby classes, are really just kind of diving into, the technicalities and I'm not going to call it minutia, but maybe it's just kind of the idiosyncrasies of kind of making that work better for you. Mm-hmm. And after a while, it ends up being pretty easy. As far as having skill and how that helped me on the ELL, the Experiential Learning Lab, I think what happened there was it allowed me to have like a pretty firm grasp on, what I can and cannot do with a gun in my hand. How quickly can I get to, how quickly can I get to the gun?
And just for the benefit of, I think that most folks, especially if they're actually part of this little pod, have an idea of it, but just to kind of touch on it. The Experiential Learning Lab that Craig puts on is essentially it's a scenario-based evolution. It's not the same kind of man-on-man stuff that you see from the ECQC course. It is essentially, it's a routine day-to-day scenario that you find yourself in, and then suddenly there is some kind of crime unfolding that you then have to address in a manner that you see fit.
Basically, they told me, hey, you go in there, you do your thing, and you come out. Easy peasy. All right, cool. And so I knew something was going to happen in there, but I was like, okay, well, let me just fall into the scenario, okay? Because if I go in there amped up and I do something that I wouldn't normally do, I don't think that's going to teach me anything about myself. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go in here. The thing happened, and it instantly turned into a dumpster fire. Not go at all how I wanted it to go. So, of course, I mean, just from the subject matter that we're dealing with here, yeah, guns came out, right? I was looking for, and this is where things got kind of interesting, right? What I remember and what happened were two different things. What Craig does and what makes him so unique in the industry is that he adds in all the other external factors. You know what I mean? Like there's innocent people there. There's, he asks you about recall. He asks you about, decision making. And, one of the points that he makes is, you need to understand who you are with a gun and who you are without the gun, and are they the same person? So I'll tell you about what I remember. That was the kind of that was the chronologically, that was the thing that happened first, right? I have what I remember. And then we could talk about, like, I don't know, maybe like a little bit of what Craig asked me. And then it was much later where I actually saw the videos, and I was like, oh, shit. Wait till he's distracted, because he already had the drop on me. Wait till he's distracted. When he's distracted, I could draw on him. And there may have been a malfunction there. I slightly remember a tap rack. And then I did a little bit of maneuvering. Okay, great. Like a little side to side, because I didn't have cover. And then when the guy finally went down, I kicked the gun out of his hand. And this poor woman is there in a wheelchair, and she's screaming bloody murder. So I put the gun away, and I'm like, look, it's okay. Are you injured? And she's like, oh! And the cashier is over there. He's looking at me like, what did you do? What did you do? And I'm like, And the Craig was like, okay, out of roll. And he talks to me about it. And he's up there like, hey, so, like, tell me a little bit about what you did and why you did it. And I was like, well, I wanted to wait until he was distracted. And he was like, well, you didn't wait until he was distracted. You wait until he was turned towards you. I was like, oh, really? And I was like, I don't remember that. I thought I went over this way to draw the gunfire away from me. And I was like, okay, maybe something else happened. He also asked me, like, probably the two most important questions. If I had any trouble sleeping that night, it was because of these two questions. He asked me, what do you think you did wrong? And I was like, well, I don't know. Okay, What do you think you did right? And I took a longer pause.
Just because I know Craig is a stickler for terminology, and I'll go back and I'll double check, but I believe he asks, what did you do well and what could you have done differently? I don't think he used, I don't remember him using such judgmental verbiage.
He really, that's the thing about it. That's one thing that really kind of separated him from, you know, from the pack. I could feel the scrutiny, but I didn't feel judgment. You know, there wasn't any judgment, just analysis. Mm-hmm. Later on in the day, I was able to actually catch some of that footage. I saw some of the footage, and I was like, that was when I started to see what actually happened. A couple of things that surprised myself was, of course, first off, exactly what Craig said happened. Yeah, stuff definitely went sideways. Like, I lost my footing, fell over. I scrambled back up to my feet, and there was a malfunction. I tapped rack. I don't even remember that. Strafed. I wasn't thinking. I was reacting. When Craig was asking me those questions, it was very easy for me. Like, I'm talking minutes or even hours later. It was very easy for those memories to come back. But right there in the moment afterwards, maybe in the same time frame that you would be talking to police, it was hard for me to, you know, to recall all that stuff. There's a lot of recall. There's a lot of awareness. And there was also, it wasn't the gunfight that was the hardest part. It was dealing with all the other people, you know, like the innocent bystanders that aren't used to violence.
It's interesting that you mentioned that most of the participants that opted to go to guns were confident in their skill set. And going back and kind of revisiting it, I didn't think about it that way, but with limited exception, yeah, like I don't recall, like, no bystanders got hit. For the most part, people were fairly decent with their backstops, excluding the kind of the artificial horseshoe of observers.
Yeah.
What's your take on how people should prioritize their training efforts? Because whether it is X performance metric or X piece of gear or what have you, there's always going to be the gatekeepers of, well, if you're not doing it up to this level, then you really just shouldn't bother. You should either, you know, quit or take it more seriously. So how should regular people that don't do this for a living establish what their minimum competencies should be without relegating themselves to mediocrity?
Like, when I first got started, I wanted to answer two questions. What did violence look like? Because I had my own exposure, but I wanted to know what all was pertinent to me in the city of Memphis. And then I also want to answer the question, what kind of skill do I need in order to defeat that kind of violence? I think almost everybody's journey is going to start off kind of like mine. I don't think my journey is atypical. I think a lot of folks just start off with the permit. They go with the permit, or if you're in a state that has permitless carry, I think whatever the state permit is or whatever introductory class you have is still going to be good. And then usually once you get good with marksmanship and manipulation of the gun, maybe you go on to you know, how to best carry it on your person. And then from there, once you gain more confidence with just, you know, lining up the sights and managing the trigger, and then actually safely getting it out of the holster, and more importantly, safely getting it back into the holster. And then from there, tossing in a couple other concepts like using walls and barricades as cover, how to move with a firearm in your hand, and how to transition between different targets. But I think the biggest thing is really just understanding violence, not really so much like physically, but mentally. You know, and this is why Dr. William April's stuff is so informative, why it's so influential, because, you know, he talks a lot about like how victims are selected. You have stuff by John Hearn about who wins, who loses, and why. He has this gorgeous chart where it talks about automaticity.
Mhm.
And there's a couple of different metrics on that chart where on the left-hand side of the chart, I don't know if this is left on your side of the screen, but on one side of the chart, you have basically your beginner stuff, okay?
Sure.
What would a beginner build drill look like? What would a beginner failure drill look like? Like maybe a novice in IDPA. And then as you get further over into this side of the chart, okay, this is what a FBI qual looks like, or this is what like a master IDPA shooter would look like. This is a 2-second build drill. This is like and the more skill you gain, the more that stuff becomes kind of automatic, and you can start thinking about all your other actions. Such as like what to do. And that's actually going to be, I think that's a little bit more important than actually just pressing triggers. I think that while a lot of folks are trying to figure out how to shoot the gun better, I think that it's probably better for us to figure out how we can avoid situations where we can have a gun in our hand. Like,
Absolutely.
There's one idiom that's very common in the aviation community. And it was hanging on a poster at work when I was in the Marine Corps. Superior pilots use their superior wisdom to avoid situations where they have to use their superior skills.
Again, from these experiences, as well as you being an instructor, from the mechanical shooting side, just because it's a nice, tidy number, what do you think are like the top 3 things that a mid-level shooter should work on?
I think the main thing, the number one thing that people need to really automate is keeping their finger off the trigger when their sights are off the target, and just keeping the muzzle downrange. That's like the number one thing, right? If you could find a way to make that automatic, and there's ways to do that, right? You could cook that into your dry practice, and I'm talking like there are guys where I'm talking in big matches, right? They'll slip, fall, bust their ass. I'm talking ass over tea kettle, right? And they get back up, and I have to tell them, hey, the clock's still running because they're still in the game. Their muzzle is still downrange, and their finger is still straight. Meanwhile, in like a basic intro marksmanship class, you'll have guys where you have to tell them, hey, look, if I have to tell you to keep your finger off the trigger, if that finger wanders onto the trigger one more time, I'm going to have to kick you out of there because this is the 3rd time I'm telling you. The second thing is, there's, as far as straight up technical skill, managing the trigger without disturbing the sights. If everybody could do that 100% of the time, no one would ever miss. The problem is we have other stuff in there. Most of it's emotional. If I can remove myself from, the emotional repercussions of my shooting, if I could just accept that criticism without judgment, then it's going to help me keep those emotions in check. And most of the time, where I think the third thing is really just learning how to be more deliberate and more reluctant with our holster, because man, it breaks my heart to see somebody talking, going Ricky Bobby, and they're doing all the cool stuff on Instagram, and then when the gun goes in the holster, bam, they slam it, right? Or in matches where dude does great shredding a stage, all right, great, and it's time to go back into the holster, and he tries to braille his way into the holster using his muzzle, and I'm like, dude, I have to DQ you. And he's like, what are you talking about? I just yeah, but you muzzled the hell out of yourself. Yeah, like you're pointing the gun at yourself. We can't let you do that. So it sucks. So safety, and emotions. It may not be technical.
Well, and the funny thing about it is that talking about even something as simple as trigger discipline, when you start getting amped up to the appropriate degree, I am a passable shooter. Like, I'm typically shooting on like the 5x5 classifier between master and expert. I'm right on that cusp between them. I'm usually, my most recent fast that I shot was including adjustments for my dropped shots, 7 seconds. And if I shoot it clean, I'm usually about 7 seconds. So, nothing really brag worthy, but decent. I was in a position where, and I'm going to have to be intentionally vague due to disclosures that were signed, but I basically was in a situation where I was able to play OPFOR for some folks. I was effectively just kind of a bullet sponge, but I'm in this abandoned building at like 9 o'clock at night with a freaking blank firing AK, just waiting for a door to get kicked in so I can get killed. And the sheer anticipation of waiting there for over 45 minutes, I found myself trigger checking. It's an inert gun. It's not going to even do anything. Like whether or not it goes bang is entirely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Like, is it still there? Is it still there? Is it still there?
Yeah.
Because it was novel stimulus. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And I'm fixing to be on the receiving end of some very violent people. So, it's a stressful circumstance. So
it happens.
It was like, if it can happen to me, not that I'm anybody spectacular, but if it can happen to me, it's definitely happening to new shooters on the line, and sometimes even somewhat not necessarily novice experienced shooters on the line. One other thing that I like to do on these is, after the first one, I just kind of randomly sort of compiled this. And so it's kind of like the last 5 questions that I like to wrap it up with. And the first one is, what is one thing that you think that gun dudes should stop doing?
I got to use myself as an example.
Okay.
Well, I have a lot of friends that do this too. We got to stop making guns our only hobby. We got to get out there and do something else. It happened to me personally. That's why I have to use myself as an example. What was it? I forget what it was. I went to a lunch with a buddy of mine, and I knew he wasn't into guns, and I knew that, it wasn't like he was anti-gun. It just seemed inconsiderate to,
he was non-gun.
Yeah, just a basic normal Earth person, right?
Yeah.
You know how hard it was for me not to talk about guns. It was like, okay, I'm talking 15 minutes in, I totally ran out of stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing else going on in my life. So it just really kind of reinforced to me, man, I got to read some books, or I gotta learn the guitar or something, solve a Rubik's Cube, something.
Yeah. The next one is, if you had and dealer's choice, this is fairly open-ended, but favorite menswear accessory. It can be an article of clothing, it can be a true accessory, what have you. But I try and at least, fold the sartorial influence in a little bit.
So my favorite men's accessory,
by
far, underwear. I don't know if that's an accessory, if that counts, because if you have bad fitting underwear, it's just going to wreck your whole day. It really just is.
All right.
Now, if that doesn't count, then the next thing I'm going to go to is watches. I'm not really particularly. I'm not really a watch guy. I'm as much of a watch guy as I am a car guy. As in, I know enough to change my own oil, but I'm not buying a Ferrari tomorrow. You know what you like, and what kind of resonates with you, but you can't quote how many joules the movement has and all that kind of crap. Exactly. Absolutely not. No.
Yep.
Like my daily driver right here is a Casio Duro on a James Bond NATO strap, and this is what I wear 5 or 6 days out of the week. with the blue
Dude.
dial. I'm such a sucker for a blue dial. It's got a quartz movement. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because it can get ran over by a truck, and I'm not going to care. It was $40.
There you go.
Now, what sits in the case is a Seiko 5, and even that's not even expensive. It's like maybe $150, but that's what I wear to weddings and funerals, and that's what I wear to church. That's like that right there with like the crocodile strap, and that's the jewel. But this right here is just
Dude, those Casio Duos are solid workhorse watches. There ain't nothing wrong with those. Out of curiosity, though, just because the underwear comment makes perfect sense, but it's not what I would have expected. What's your preferred brand?
Right now, I like Fruit of the Loom. Fruit of the Loom is really good for me. I used to be a Hanes guy, but I think what happened was I was in a weight transition, and it really just didn't follow me. Like I was dropping in weight, and I had to get more underwear, and I was rising up in weight, I had to get different underwear. Fruit of the Loom, it ends up just kind of, if I drop 20 pounds, it'll still be there with me.
Yeah.
If I drop 40 or 50, then yeah, of course. Like if you drop you drop 2 or 3 inches, and it's not going to hang with you.
Yeah. Whenever you feel like your underwear drawer is ready for a refresh, MeUndies and Shinesty are both pretty fantastic. Now they are online only.
So MeUndies
and Shinesty.
Can you spell Shinesty? Like SHY?
SHINESTY.
You said SHIE?
Yeah, SHINE.
INE.
STY.
STY.
Yeah.
Shinesty. Okay.
MeUndies are a traditional boxer brief cut. The Shinesty are like the type with the pouch. But the fabrics on both of them are phenomenal, especially for Gulf Coast heat. Check them out.
Yeah, underwear, man, because that's the difference,
Yeah.
You got bad underwear. I'm talking like, you ever, this is going to sound really bad, but it's a term that I just recently, I didn't even know this was a term. You ever heard of big dick energy? Like, what was it? Like, I guess, Kim Kardashian is dating, Pete Davidson from SNL.
Yep.
And she's talking about like, yeah, he's got, BDE action going on. And it's not even about like the size of your member. It's really just about, being relaxed, about just being chill and being honest and being genuine. And
you got nothing to prove to anybody.
Yeah. It's real easy to be genuine when your underwear fits right, because if it doesn't, you got like this whole, oh boy. And it's like, are you late for a meeting or something? Yeah. It's like, are you late for something? Am I holding you back? Or no, just, and they're never going to tell you.
Right.
Like, you can't tell anybody about, I got bad underwear. It's almost like, like my wife talks about, she spent a lot of time looking for bras. So, it took a while, she's a little bit more blessed. So, it took a while for her to find bras that fit her.
I gotcha. That's definitely. Sometimes it's the details that really can make it break it.
Yeah.
And so then the next one is favorite adult beverage.
Oh man, so it used to be this right here, Jameson, right?
Okay.
So Jameson, because it's reliable.
Response.
It is, yeah. It's just reliable. If a dude named Jameson gave you orders, you'd probably follow him. But a more recent drink, right? And I know it sounds like, this is going to sound kind of weird, but Twisted Tea.
Okay.
Because, well, I mean, just from that clip a couple years ago, I guess you can also use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
And I never drank Twisted Tea as much beer as I drank back in the Marine Corps. I'm talking truckloads of beer, right? Like I lost track of how many keg stands I did on multiple, for multiple reasons. But
so that's how it goes.
Yeah, but I never tried Twisted Tea until that video came out, and I was like, well, I was talking to my wife about it, and she was like, "You should try it." I was like, "Okay, well," and I got hooked. So yeah, I barely drink beer anymore. This is this and Jameson.
There you go.
I'll do other stuff every once in a while, but those two, yeah.
Nice. And it's funny because you kind of already touched on this, but one non-tactical or non-applied violence related hobby.
So it used to be easy because it was IT, but I'm actually like, so my real job, right? The thing that finances all my habits, I do cybersecurity.
Okay.
And so before then, my hobby was like breaking into shit. It was, like I'm talking picking locks and hacking computers and stuff like that. But it's hard to do that, and stay on the up and up. I never really got into trouble, but I knew that that's
you were kind of dancing
easy
on the edge.
Yeah, but nowadays it's reading, and nowadays it's the guitar. Trying to learn the bass. I think it's still a lot of fun to be new at something. And the bass guitar is still. I mean, I'm still learning a lot about music theory and stuff like that. So it's just I just find that instrument to be extremely beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, wasn't that part of John Hearn's Who Wins, Who Loses, and Why lecture of like the neuroplasticity of learning new things?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, not to cheapen it and tie it back in everything else, but there are decided tactical benefits to learning non-tactical shit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like us as human beings, we have kind of a I guess I would say a proclivity to stuff like that. Neuroplasticity, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last one is, what weapon do you have within arm's reach right now?
Oh man, like, so this is funny because I don't have one. So my
Marine, adapt, improvise, and overcome.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, I have like, so within arm's reach, it's if we could extend a little bit further, right? And of course, I have a number of pencils, right? There's this Rubik's cube right here, and there's a cell phone. If I go a little bit further beyond arm's reach, there's a K-bar over here, and then there's my entire gun safe, and then this over here is where I keep all my carry weapons.
Okay.
And so it's not technically within arm's reach.
It's close enough.
I mean, this bottle of Jameson right here, you know what?
There
if I use
it right. Anything's a weapon if you hold it right. Very cool, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time out. This has been super fun. I'm glad to see that we are going to be seeing each other again in Dallas next year. And hopefully our paths will cross again before then.
I think, you know what? It's such a small community. I think they will. I think it's not going to be long before we run into each other again.
Very cool, man. Well, again, I appreciate you taking the time. I hope you have a great night. And aside from that, stay dangerous, buddy.
My brother, man, thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.